Hey everybody, welcome into episode 20 of my YouTube journey. Tonight we're going to finish up the Mickey Mantle stories. This is part 2. Last week was part 1. I've got some good feedback on it, so we'll continue the story where I left off. Before I get started, when I do these stories, I'm not reading a script. I'm going off memory. I may look down at a piece of paper every now and then to get a stat right or a date right. But unfortunately, I try to do it all in one. I try not to cut it up, and I think it flows better that way. I want it to be something that I'm telling a story and not reading a book to you. So I'm going to mess up sometimes, and I did last week. So when I said that Casey Stengel always wanted his Jimmy Fox, it was actually Mel Ott. I screwed that up. I had a couple people, well, actually, I kind of knew it when I was doing the video. If you watched me, I kind of paused for a second, and that's when the camera shut off, and then I got all flustered and screwed up. So screwed up, sorry about that. Also, Commerce, Oklahoma, I realized that after I did the video. It was not in the southeastern part of Oklahoma. It's actually in the northeastern. It's up near Missouri, that area. So screwed that up. So please forgive me. I'll try to correct those when I can, but I'm correcting it here. Where we left off, he was entering the 51 season. He had spent 1950 in the minors. We talked about how he got signed and the whole fiasco around that. And in 1951, he goes into spring training. He's just killing the ball. He hits 2 mammoth home runs in Los Angeles against USC that is, at that time, some people said those were the longest home runs ever hit in the history of baseball. So he's doing things like that, and Casey Stengel's like, I want him on my roster. And we kind of talked about that last week. So he starts out the 51 season. Oh, going back to the minor league, this is a neat story. And I'm not in the minor leagues, spring training. They're playing against the Dodgers, and he hits 2 mammoth home runs, one from the right side, one from the left side. Branch Rickey, the owner of the Dodgers, or the GM also, that we know from the Jackie Robinson story, rips off a blank check, signs it, and is sitting by the owner of the Yankees and hands it to him and said, fill it in. Whatever you want to write on that check is good by me. I want him playing for the Dodgers. And of course, the Yankees owner passed on that, or history would have been completely changed. But that's how much he was thought of. So he rolls into New York on opening day, April 17th, 1951. He's hitting third. We got Jackie Jensen, who was the bonus baby I referenced last week and couldn't think of his name, batting leadoff. You had Rizzuto batting second, Mantle batting third. You had Joe DiMaggio batting fourth, Yogi Berra batting fifth. And so they were loaded. And I think who was batting sixth? I didn't write down that, but that's from memory who they were batting. So I'd written that down before in case I forgot. And so they roll in there. They're playing the Boston Red Sox. So there's a famous picture of him with Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams on opening day. You can see his youth. I'll put it right here over my shoulder so you can see what he looked like on that famous day. And he starts out the season, he's doing really well, and then hit a slump. And he was 0 for something. And I mean, and they were really concerned about was he was going to lose all of his confidence, and he was going to spiral out of control. But what they didn't really know at that time, when he came to New York, he didn't know anybody. And he was in a big city. He was alone. He was staying in a hotel, looking at the walls at night. And there was this guy, just like there usually is. And he convinces Mantle to let him represent Mickey Mantle and offered him all this money that he didn't have. So he's going around town and he's trying to recruit people to buy into this money scheme to pay Mickey Mantle, because he had led Mickey to believe that he'd get $50,000 just for signing with him. He didn't have $50,000. So one of the people he talked to was this Broadway showgirl model. She had actually won Miss New Jersey at one point. She was really pretty. And she went by the stage name Holly Brooke, and got her to pay $1,500. And so Holly Brooke wanted to meet this guy. So he meets Holly Brooke and is just enamored with her. And at this time, he's engaged to a girl named Merlin back home in Oklahoma. And he falls head over heels for this Holly Brook girl. So they start having a love affair, and he's dating her. Now, Merlin doesn't know about this, but Holly shows him all around New York City. She was older than he was, and had a child from another relationship, and so she knew New York City like the back of her hands. She introduced him to people, showed him where he could go eat. Real quick, being only 19 years old, he was under drinking age. He realized real quick that didn't matter when you're a New York Yankee. So people were comping his drinks, comping his food. People wanted to see this young kid who was supposed to be all that. And so unfortunately, he fell into alcoholism at a very young age. She recalled him in the book I'm referencing. It's called Mickey Mantle, The Greatest There Ever Was, by a guy named Castro. And he interviewed her a lot, and she recalled all the times together and how he would be up throwing up. He would drink so much, and she felt really guilty about that. So that's part of the decline you see in his stats. He couldn't handle what he was doing. And, I told you last week about he was a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And a lot of times people have destructive behavior after that, especially if they don't get counseling or something. So he was struggling with that destructive behavior. He was also struggling, not thinking he was good enough was one of his biggest things. Everything he did was motivated out of fear. And the biggest fear he had was not being good enough, whether it was being good enough for his dad, being good enough for the Yankees, whatever. He sometimes would have so much stress on him that he'd have a panic attack. And so he was dealing with a lot of that stuff. So, when he showed up with the Yankees, he had all these high expectations. In fact, the longtime clubhouse guy, his last name was Sheehy. And in fact, the clubhouse in Yankee Stadium is named after him. He got there like 3 years after Yankee Stadium opened. He was there. He'd seen Ruth, Gehrig. He had been there for all of them. He was there when the Yankees decided to put numbers on uniforms. So Mantle had shown up and had all this fanfare behind him. Well, Pete Sheehy, the clubhouse guy, is the one who decided that he was going to have number 6 when he showed up there, because you had Ruth, number 3, you had Gehrig, it was number 4, and then Pete Sheehy decided when he saw that DiMaggio was all that, he gave DiMaggio number 5, and so he had them all there in a row, and so he gave Mantle number 6, and because he thought he was the next great Yankee, and it was wild how they all came in succession like that. So Mantle gets number 6. He goes on a decline, and he gets sent down to the minors. And Casey Stengel calls him in the office, has tears in his eyes, what Mantle recalled, and told him this was going to be harder for you than it is harder for me than it is for you, and said he was going to send him down to try to get his confidence back. So they send him to AAA Kansas City. And the reason they sent him there is because the manager of the Kansas City team at the time was an ex-major leaguer who was known for walking. And one of Mickey's problems during that slump was he was chasing a lot of pitches. He wasn't being disciplined at the plate, and they thought that this manager could teach him discipline and help him with his hitting. So they sent him down. It's a real shock to him. Again, he feels like he's failed. His confidence is at an all-time low. Feels like he's never going to get back again. So he's thrown into the mix of a bunch of guys, and what Mantle described him to this author. He became friends with this Castro guy, and they were golfing buddies and everything. So he had all these stories from Mantle that he would tell, and Mantle would tell him that it was a bunch of older guys. They were drinking. They were malcontents. They looked at Mantle like this kid that just got thrown down to get some at bats, and he was going to start ahead of them when they're trying to make it to the majors, and they didn't like him. They didn't want to be friends with him. And then you had Mantle feeling all bad about himself and down in the dumps. So he goes on a 0 for 22 skid. Calls his dad one night and tells his dad that he didn't think he was cut out to play baseball. He was just going to quit and come home. And his dad said that he sounded horrible and was just, he was worried about him. And so his dad packed up his sister, his wife, or Mickey's sister, Mickey's mom, and his fiance Merlin, who later became his wife, packed them all in a car and just drove the short distance over to Kansas City from where they were in Oklahoma. So, unbeknownst to them, Holly Brooke, his girlfriend from New York, had flown there to Kansas City to be with him, to help cheer him up and help him get back on his feet. And so when they show up at the hotel unannounced, knock on the door, and Mickey comes to the door, there's Holly in there in the room. And in her interview, she recalls her and Merlin kind of exchanging glances, and she got up and ran in the bathroom, but she could hear this whole conversation from behind the bathroom door that Mutt and Mickey had. It's that famous conversation where Mantle says to Castro, he wanted his daddy to come and tell him, "Oh, Mickey, you're good enough. You just got to believe in yourself. We believe in you. You can do it. It's going to be okay." He wanted that speech. That is not the speech he got. Mutt told him, said, "Well, I mean, I thought I raised a man, and obviously I raised a coward." And as he starts talking to him, he gets his clothes and he starts putting them in the suitcase. So, "I guess you're just going to come back with me and work in the mines." And Mickey's like, "No, Dad, no." And so it was a real wake-up call. And the way he treated him that day, it's just kind of like he drew a line in the sand. And at that point, he had a conversation with him about Holly and told him that he was in love with her and he wanted to marry her. And Merlin and everybody except him and his dad, Merlin and all them had stepped out of the room. It was him and his dad alone in there, and Holly was in the bathroom. And he told him, "No, Merlin loves you. She's from our town. You're going to marry her." And Mantle, again, not wanting to disappoint his dad, was a big deal to him. He just let him say what he said. I don't know where Holly went, but she probably went back to New York at that point. And the whole family went to his game the next day, and he hit a big home run and got out of his slump. At that point, he went on a tear. So he's tearing it up and gets his confidence back and everything else, and tears it up and hit like 365 the rest of the season. Helped them almost finish in first place. And I wrote that down right here. He hit 361, had 60 hits, 11 home runs, had an OPS of 1.096, had 50 RBIs. He returns to the Yankees in August 24th, 1951. He comes back to the Yankees, a refreshed guy, and at that point he returns to his girlfriend, and they continue. Basically, she moved in with him, and or he moved in with her, but they were living together. And he finishes out the season pretty strong. In fact, when he gets back, he's no longer number 6. He's now going to be the famous number 7 for the New York Yankees. And so the story that Holly Brooke tells about why he's number 7 is that her birthday is on the 7th. And she told him when she was in Kansas City with him, said, "Look, trust me, when you get back, to flush all that mess you put up with and become a new player, you need to change numbers, and you need to be number 7. That's my birthday. I believe number 7 is lucky. And so when you get back, request the number 7 jersey." So a lot of people don't know that. Now, could she have been lying? Possibly. I don't know if they've ever heard that story from Mantle himself. But that's the story she told, is why he changed from number 6 to number 7. And they make it to the World Series. At the World Series, he's living his dream world life. Like, he's this kid who is the fastest kid in the major leagues, and had a decent season, hit high 200s. And he's rolling into the World Series, playing right field right beside the legendary Joe DiMaggio. In fact, I mentioned last week how fast he was. He was clocked at 3.1 seconds to first base from the left-handed box. 3.1 seconds. That equates to a 4.1 40-yard dash. That is blazing speed. In fact, Bo Jackson, the fastest he ever ran was like 3.4 seconds. So, and he was from the right side. I understand that. But, everybody talks about how fast Bo Jackson was. Well, that was Mantle hitting just mammoth home runs and could run like a deer. So he's out in right field. Casey Stengel, before the second game, said, all right, look, DiMaggio's heel's hurting him real bad today. Anything you can get to, you go get it. Call the ball, go get it. Show everybody how much range you have. So in the fifth inning, Mantle's already 1 for 2 in the game. Willie Mays are playing the New York Giants, who had just come off Bobby Thompson's shot heard around the world and made it to the World Series. And Willie Mays hits a blooper in right center field. Mantle's hauling for it, and he's called the ball. And at the last second, Joe DiMaggio calls him off. And Mantle, not wanting to collide with Joe DiMaggio, an aging Joe DiMaggio at that, peels off. And as he did, his spike gets caught in a drain cover, and it twists his knee, and he feels a pop, and he goes down. It hurt him so bad, he kind of almost lost consciousness there for a second. DiMaggio runs over to him, is bending over, Mick. And DiMaggio recounts as he thought actually somebody shot him with a gun because the way he went down and he wasn't moving and he wasn't responding. He tells him, stay right here, Mick, and he's waving for a stretcher, and they grab a stretcher, and they stretch him off. They take a stretcher and get him off the field. Mutt Mantle runs down to the gate and gets to the dugout about the time they get there, and he thinks, oh my God, the dream is over. Mantle, and it wasn't the leg that he had hurt, that he had the osteomyelitis in, that they almost had to amputate his leg when he was a kid. It was the other leg. It was his good leg. And so it's just like worst case scenario. Mantle's crying. He thinks this is it. He recalls like feeling a bone like almost sticking out the side. He tore a bunch of ligaments in his knee. And of course, back then they didn't have all the surgeries and the things they could do. And so he's thinking this is it. So he goes home at night and his knee swells up like twice the size. The next day, all these moments like forks in the road happen all at once in his life. The next day, he recalls they go in a taxi cab. It's him and his dad. They're going to the hospital to have all the tests done. And when they get there, the taxi cab pulls up on the street. Mutt goes around to the side where Mantle is to help him out because he's on crutches and he can't put any weight on that leg. And when he gets out, he puts his weight on his dad's shoulder, who had always been this strong, hardworking Oklahoman man. And when he puts his weight on him, his dad crumples to the ground. And at that moment, he's like, what in the world's going on? And his dad's like laying there. And two people, hospital attendants, run from the ER, sees this happen. And they put both of them in a wheelchair and wheel them in. And so they're doing these tests on Mickey, but they're also doing it on Mutt. And it's at that point they realize that Mutt had been sick and he had kind of kept it to himself. Mantle had no idea. And he had Hodgkin's disease, which is cancer. And that's what Mantle's grandfather died from in 1944 when Mantle was like 13 years old. It's what people die from when they work in the mines. So, and it's terminal. There's nothing they can do about it. And so there's another blow to Mantle. And so Mickey and his dad shared a hospital room. They were in twin beds in the same room and watched the rest of the World Series there on the TV laying beside each other. That December, and the Yankees go on to win the World Series. That December, Mantle goes back to Oklahoma. He's still in love with Holly, but he wants to make his dad happy. So he marries Merlin and has a small ceremony there at their house. And now he's married. And Merlin thought it was never going to happen. She was getting ready to move back to Albuquerque after seeing Holly in the hotel room that day. But it did. And she was in love with Mickey, and she wanted to be his wife. So they got married. So Mantle starts his 52 season. He rehabs his knee. It's never going to be the same. It's going to hurt him, and it's going to give him trouble the rest of his life. It hampered him. He was never that fast guy again. He always played in pain. You see pictures of him in the locker room, and his legs are both of them are wrapped like mummies. Gauze wrapped all the way from his ankle all the way up to his hip. And so he plays in pain the rest of his life. And really, it became a deal where it became part of his mystique. It's kind of like James Dean. You know, what could he have been if he wouldn't have died so young? It became like Marilyn Monroe. You know, she died in the prime of her career. What could she have done? You know, would she have moved into bigger roles and not always been the funny blonde? Would she have gotten some serious roles? You know, the same thing. Even during Mantle's career, everybody said they would recount that day and recount his legs and how fast he was and what could he have been. So he was immortal, and yet he was doing immortal things on bad legs, and people were drawn to that story, and he became this bigger than life guy. So he's hitting like in fact, the word tape measure home run came from a home run he hit in 1953 out of Washington Stadium and Griffin Stadium. He had a home run that was so long that the guy for the Yankees, who is the publicity guy, went out and got a tape measure and measured it, and it became known as a tape measure home run. So if you ever hear that term anymore, you know it goes back to Mantle's home run in 1953. He has an illustrious career. In 56, he wins the Triple Crown. There's only a handful of guys that ever done that. He wins a Triple Crown. In 57, he has a better season than he had in 56. But unfortunately, well, for him, Ted Williams, aging Ted Williams, the Splendid Splinter, one of the greatest hitters ever born, has a phenomenal season and beats Mantle out in the batting average race. But Mantle wins the home run and RBIs. And his WAR that year was actually higher than it was in 56. He ends up winning the MVP in 62. So, and he goes to all these World Series. He goes to, I wrote this down, I didn't want to get it wrong like I did the other day. From 1951 to 1964, 14 years, he goes to World Series 12 of those. So when you start comparing players, like Mantle and Mays are always getting compared. It's not really, I mean, it's just part of it, but they were both amazing players. Of course, Mays lost a couple years to the war. Mantle didn't have to go because he was 4F. In fact, people were getting so upset about that, calling him a draft dodgers, that they did physicals on him 4 different times. He failed every one of them. And after 51, when he messed his knee up so bad, he would fail him because of that. So he couldn't go to the war. It wasn't his fault. But so he in the war, so I wrote down some stats right here. He went to 20 All-Star games. He was MVP in 56, 57, 62. He was second in the MVP in 60, 61, and 64. He led the league in WAR from 55 to 59, and then again in 61. He was third in all-time in home runs when he retired. And so he did all this stuff. He won all these World Series rings. His World Series numbers, he hit a record, and still record today, 18 home runs in World Series games. He's got the record for the most RBIs in the World Series, 40. Most extra base hits, 26. The most runs, 42. The most walks, 43. The most total bases, 123. So, dude just set it on fire. And so, if you wonder why in the baby boomer age, my dad's age, why this dude was an idol, it's because of that. It's what he did on the big stage. It's what he did by hitting tape measure home runs. It's the legend of Mickey Mantle. It's the what ifs about Mickey Mantle. It's all those things. He was this superhuman dude who was human. He was injured all the time. But yet, and here's the thing people don't talk about with Mickey Mantle as much as probably they should. He was so injured. And so you can measure tape measure home runs. You can measure your speed to first base. You can get stats. You can get all that stuff. But what you can't measure is somebody's heart. And dude had the heart of a champion. He gave it all he had, even when he didn't feel like it. Even when some guys wouldn't have played with the injuries he had, he did. Now, he had the alcoholism going on. He had the womanizing. He wasn't just Holly Brook he was with. He was running around. He was a playboy. He was taking it all in. And, you know, the old saying is, well, I didn't think, because his dad died at 40 years old. I never thought I'd live past 40. I was going to live it up. You know, to me, that's a facade right there. He was dealing with some demons is what he was dealing with. He was dealing with what happened to him in his childhood. He was dealing with the fact he lost his dad at a young age. He was dealing with all the fears that he wasn't going to live up. It was all the things that he blamed himself for, and he was going to destroy himself. Merlin stayed with him all those years, and she loved him and stood by his side, even when he was out carousing and doing all the crap and destroying himself. And then towards the end, they finally broke up, and in Mantle, he died of liver cancer at 63 years old because of all the drinking he did. So he destroyed himself, and he knew it. And later on, he came to amends with that, and he was preaching like, don't do to yourself what I did. And he was telling that kind of stuff. So before we show the cards, just to kind of talk about this, the baby boomer age, the Mickey Mantle and the idolization of Mantle and the bigger than life Mantle. Here's why. In 1950, I wrote this down. In 1950, 20% of American households had a TV set in it. 20%, and that amounted to 6 million households. 20%. By the time 1960 got around, 90% of American households had a TV in it. 52 million homes. So it goes from 6 million to 52 million. They didn't have ESPN. They didn't have TBS. They didn't have WGN. They didn't have MLB channel. They saw games on TVs on Saturdays, and sometimes there was doubleheaders on Sundays. But buddy, you better believe when it came around the World Series time, every TV in America, it was America's pastime, was turned on to those games. And what did they see? They saw that dude killing the ball. They saw that guy hit World Series home run after World Series home run. They saw the announcers talk about him. They dissected his stance. Dude was a switch hitter, doing things that they had never seen before. And so you think about all that stuff. Those little boys and little girls idolized him. And so when the 80s roll around and their kids are starting to collect baseball cards like I did, and they started seeing the fun their kids, and they wanted to find their baseball cards. They go back to their parents' house and they were gone, nowhere to be found. They would tell the stories about how they went off to Vietnam and their mom just threw their cards away, or whatever the case was. Their cards were not there anymore. And so when they went back to find them, and some found them, some didn't, but they wanted those cards. So they would go to these card shows and they would buy them, and it drove the price up. And so cards like the 52 Mantle, the high numbers, and the rookie cards all the way through the 60s, Mantle's cards are going to be the most expensive card in every set he's in, usually. His 1951 rookie card is the same year as Mays's, and there's no comparison in the price. The same with the 52. You know, the 52 Mantle sold for over $12 million a couple of years ago in a 9.5. So it's the most expensive card ever sold. And all of that goes back to that mystique, the Mantle mystique, the pinstripes, the World Series, the games of the weeks, the things he could do, the stories about what if. And so all those boys and girls out in the yards, you know, trying to copy his swing. My uncle, he is in the Nashville Old Timers Baseball Hall of Fame. He was a stud player. When I was in college, I would play baseball in the summers, and he would play on my team. We'd be playing college pitching, and my uncle would be in his 40s, and he could smash home runs. Now, he didn't switch hit, but his stance was Mickey Mantle's stance, and he copied it to a T. And so he was one of those guys. He grew up in that age. So we're about to look at Mantle's cards. And so I appreciate y'all hanging in for this long story. I hope it piqued your interest in Mantle. Go get a book. This book was awesome. It tells a lot of behind the scenes stories. There's some great Mickey Mantle books out there. Grab some, read them. It's worth your time. And his cards are worth collecting. So we're gonna jump into the cards now. I appreciate it. and we'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back. There was a recent auction, and these were both in the auction. They were separate, but I felt like they were going for a decent price, so I went ahead and pulled the trigger and bought both of them. And the main reason is I love the ballpoint pen. It's a very strong signature on those. But on the flip, they're sequential on the serial number, which tells me obviously they were graded at the same time, which means it probably came from the same collection and was signed by Mantle at the same time, the same day. So I thought that was pretty cool. So I went ahead and nabbed them. So we got the 58. It's a great card. I love the orange background on that. Just kind of pops. I think this is one of his prettier cards in the 50s. And then the 69. I showed the 69 last week, and obviously I didn't have this one yet, but this one is the signed one. So feel very proud to add those to my collection. And last week we stopped at 1960. And so we're going to go backwards from 59. And here's the 1959 Topps Sporting News All-Star Selection card with the Sporting News shield on it and the eagle. It's a great card. Love the blue. It says Mickey is the best switch hitter of all time. He is the tape measure champion of modern sluggers. So, and Bazooka is the chew of champions. So, love the cartoons. And we talked about him, the tape measure home run was a term that came from some of his mammoth home runs he was hitting. Here's the 59 Topps. Mantle hits 42nd homer for the Crown, and the Baseball Thrills card. And it's pretty cool. Got the baseball right there coming in. Got the catcher squatting. Got the bunting up there. It's really nice. So that's the 59. And then there's this card. This is the one, I've shown this before in my videos. I've had this one since I was 12 years old. And my Little League coach gave me this card. It was not signed. And I couldn't believe I owned a Mickey Mantle. I didn't come from a very wealthy family. There's no way I could have afforded that with lawnmower cutting money. But he knew I was a baseball nut and loved baseball history. And I don't know whether he bought this and gave it to me or had it and just thought I would enjoy it, but he gave it to me. And here I am, 55 years old, and I still have it. 2 years after he gave it to me, this would have been 1984, Mantle came to a store 15 minutes from my house, and they paid him an appearance fee because it was opening night. And I was able to get this card signed for free. Didn't cost me a thing. He would sign 2 items. I brought this card to get signed, and I got it graded this year in Cleveland at the National in that one-day deal. I didn't want to mail it off, but it's a great card. I kept it in pretty good shape all these years. It was in a screw down for the longest time, signed. But yeah, when I was 14 years old, I show up at Service Merchandise Department Store, and here's that night, and that's me right there in the windbreaker, and there's Mr. Mantle in a suit and tie sitting behind a folding card table in the middle of a store with bicycles hanging up. They sold everything from diamond rings to bicycles to lawn equipment. There's one of my best friends from high school, Stephen Davis, one of my best buddies. I just talked to him on the phone today, David Woodard. And that's my cousin who works for me. And we've been working together now. He came with me day one when I started up my company. His name's Steven. He's very important to me. And he's a year younger than me. So he would have been 13. And that's us standing there. And you can see I got a ball. And that's the card in my hand right there. So this card right here, out of all the cards, I've got some that are way more expensive. This one right here will never be sold. It will go to one of my children or grandchildren. It's a hand-me-down item. And I thought I'd break this out too. That's the ball that he signed for me that day. It's got a little bit of staining on it now. I left it in my office. It started fading a little bit. It was faded so slowly. I had it at work in my office in a case. And now I have it out of the sunlight. And it's a National League ball. So the story behind that is that night I show up with my card, and then I realized he'd signed two things. Well, they sold baseballs there. And everybody had bought up all the American League. The only thing left was the National League ball. So Mickey Mantle is on a National League ball in my collection. Next, we're going to go to the 1958 Topps World Series batting foes. Love this card. I love Hank Aaron and I love Mickey Mantle. So I got both of them on one card. You can see the bunting. This picture was taken in Yankee Stadium, I believe, or maybe not. I guess I can't tell, but yeah, I believe this is Yankee Stadium. I'm not 100% sure. Let me know in the comments, but I can't tell if that's an away uniform. Yeah, he's got pinstripes on, so that's Yankee Stadium for sure. So it's a great card of two all-time greats. Aaron was my first player run, and Mantle was my second one when I got back in the hobby. And so to have both of them on the same card is really cool to me. The next one is the 1958 Topps Mickey Mantle All-Star card. Just the All-American card with the red background and the stars. Everybody's seen it. This one, I believe, was a double print. And so there's a ton of them out there. So it's a great entry-level card for the 1950s in the Mantle run. So if you want one, this is the one to really look at and consider. Here's my 58 Mantle base card unsigned, obviously, and I love it centered. It's a great card. It's got a little bit of nick right there in his hat, but it just looks awesome. And it's a 4, but again, I'm going for eye appeal, and I love how centered that one is, and the color's beautiful. Here's the 57 Topps Mantle Berra Yankees Power Hitters card. When I was a kid, I had one of these, and I probably traded it. I don't know what I traded it for, but it was all wrinkled up. Looked like somebody had it in their back pocket for a while, and I loved the card. I couldn't wait when I got back in the hobby to get another one and get a better copy. But just a great card. Mantle and Berra ran around a lot together, and there's a story in that book that I was talking about of Mantle, Berra, Whitey Ford, and Billy Martin sitting at Toots Shores one night. And Toots brings over Ernest Hemingway and sits down, and Yogi Berra says something funny. He doesn't know who he is. But can you imagine all them sitting around with Ernest Hemingway eating in New York City? This one right here is a Beckett, obviously, and it's 5. I was looking for a centered. These are kind of hard to find centered, but this is a 57 Topps. This one, they had photoshopped kind of in the old school way, somebody out, and some people call it the ghost of Babe Ruth and all that, but it's a great card. Got Mantle and his pinstripes, but the 57 Topps. And then this is what I think is one of the most beautiful cards he's got, is the 56 Topps, and it's just a beautiful card. So if you don't know the story behind this, this is an early Photoshop kind of thing. This is Mantle in 51 before his knee got hurt. So it's a young Mickey Mantle. He's leaping into the crowd and or up, and they photoshopped a ball in his glove. So he didn't actually catch this ball that day. And they wanted to make it look like they did. Also, if you'll notice, these guys right here aren't looking at the ball. It's because in the real picture, these guys were over here. And there was a big empty spot here, and they wanted to fill up the frame, so they basically took the guys from over here and put them right here. So that's why they look like they're looking at an airplane or a bird fly over. But so yeah, it's a great card. Again, that's the 51 Mantle right there in the background. Then we're getting into the Bowmans. So we got the 55 Bowman, and as you know, if you collect Mantles, he didn't have a 55 Topps card. He had a contract deal with Bowman, and so it's a beautiful card. Some people don't like these cards. I really do. I really like the TV set. I talked about in my video about how important televisions were to the popularity of the game and to Mantle in particular, and it just kind of tells a story. My mom used to sit in Nashville. Her uncle was a doctor, and he got one of the first TVs in Nashville. She remembers going over there as a little kid and watching it, and sometimes it would just be the test pattern on the TV, and they would still sit there and look at it in awe that they couldn't figure out how that got on that screen. And then we got the 54 Red Heart dog food card. Just a beautiful card with the blue and smiling Mickey. And the story behind these cards is pretty cool. Like, you could get a coupon from the cards and mail it in, and they would mail you a card. It didn't actually come in the dog food like the Cracker Jack cards came in the Cracker Jacks, but it's just a beautiful card. And the crazy thing is, with these cards, there's so many in really good condition. I mean, like, this is a 7.5, and it does have a print error stripe on it, but it's a great card. But I mean, you can find these in 8s and 9s and that, but they had so many of these printed. I read one time, I don't remember exactly, but I think they were still sending these out like in 1960. You could still mail in and get one. So they were all printed in 54. They just hadn't given them out all yet. So this one right here is a beautiful smiling Mickey Mantle, 1954 Bowman. This was, I think, the first 1950s Mantle I got. This is when I was determined I wasn't going to spend a lot of money on a card, and this one's got a little corner piece clipped off still in the case. So, but I love the card. It tells a story. It's my early part of when I got back in the hobby, and it's still a great card regardless. But it's got the beautiful blue sky and white clouds behind him there. This one right here got the 53 tops. Just a great card again. It's the same image that is on his 51. And it's just a blown up version of his face. Condition sensitive again with the red border down here. This one's an authentic. I can't find where it was colored or anything. It doesn't look trimmed. I think it was probably in a screw down and they got it graded and it was too thin. But it's just a great card, and I'm proud to own it. And then this was the last one I picked up of the main base run, and it's a 53 color, Bowman color Mantle. And these are so hard to find centered, and so I was real picky on this one, and I was finally able to get one that was centered, and so I nabbed it, and it wasn't cheap, but it's a great card. I love the blue sky. He just got so many cards with that blue background. It just pops with his uniform, and it just shows his youth in this card image. So love this card too. And then we get into the 52s. Here's the 52 Bowman. And I got this one. This is probably my second 1950s card I got, but after the 54 Bowman. And I was so excited to own a 52 Mantle. I never dreamed I'd own a 52 tops, but I could have a Bowman. And it's just a great picture. It's got the grandstands behind him. I've seen the original photograph they did this artistic rendering off of. He's kind of sitting on the top steps of the dugout. And it's a great card. And then you get into the 52 tops. And if you've seen my 52 tops Mickey Mantle episode, you know the story behind this and how I acquired it. And this is my grail card from my youth. This one was on the front of all the Beckett magazines, and this was the one that was kind of mythical. I'd never even seen one in person until I got back in the hobby, and just feel so blessed to own this and be able to look at it. And it still makes me so happy to hold it in my hand. But when I first got it, this one right here sat on my nightstand by the lamp and by my bed, and I had it on a little stand, and for probably a month it watched me sleep. I took it to work a few times, showed my brother and some people, and it would sit on my desk and watch me work. So it was a very special card to me. So that's the 52 Mantle. And then the last one is his rookie card, and it's symbolic, and I'll explain that in a minute. But it's just a great card. It's his rookie card. A lot of people call it 52s. If they do, you know, we have to tell them that's not true. But I got this one graded at the National, but I picked this one up, and it is immaculate. I mean, the registration on these sometimes can be a little off. This one is absolutely perfect, and the corners are pretty sharp. It is a tad off center, but you can see the elephant in the room right there. It has the tape. So it has the tape on the top and the bottom. And so this kind of symbolizes Mickey. It is the what could have been kind of thing with Mickey Mantle that everybody always talks about, that kind of had that Mickey Mantle mystique. And that's what it is with this card. What could it have been if somebody wouldn't have stuck this in their photo album for 50 years or however long, 60, 70 years before they took it out, but it kept it safe all those years. And but if it weren't for that tape right there, this would be at least 5, I would guess, and it would be worth so much more money. But it allowed me to get a great card for a great price that presents really well. Sure, you've got a little bit of the tape, but you know what? Mantle was great, and he had a little bit of problems, and he was still great, and he's still mythical, and he's still the most collectible guy in the hobby. So that's my cards. I appreciate you looking at them. I'll be right back. All right, guys. Hope you like the cards. Leave me a comment in the comment section. Tell me what cards you got. What part of Mantle's story that I tell that you didn't know anything about. Things like that. There's so much stuff on Mantle. This has actually been a difficult video to do because everybody knows Mickey Mantle. You know his stories. What am I going to say to make that interesting? That's a little bit difficult. And I like to make what I talk about interesting. I don't want it to be the run-of-the-mill, yeah, Mickey Mantle, and just read off a bunch of stats and that. So you know, it was difficult. It's kind of like you see a sunset your whole life. I mean, and I'm trying to describe what a sunset looked like. So it made that a little difficult. So let me know, was there anything in the story that you heard that you didn't know? Jump in there and grab some books and read about them. It's really interesting. There's a couple more I want to read about. There's one, it talks about Joe DiMaggio and Mickey. It sounds very interesting. I'm probably going to pick up at some point. So I appreciate you watching this. I appreciate all the support I get from you guys after every video, and I'll see you next time.